Anyway, we're getting on our sampans to go through the Aberdeen fishing village. The way I described it, I think I saw it as being very much like Venice in some ways, where you have basically streets lined with shops and all that. It's just on the water instead. Riding sampans instead of automobiles. The dock here looks maybe a little run down. I'm gonna say rustic. Daniel, you might recognize this like being on Lake Tiberias.
I have to admit, I was a little worried when that sampan was sent out because I thought they were leaving without us. Turned out there was another one waiting to take the rest of our group.
Wait a second.
Well, here we go.
One of the first things that we drove by after passing the welcome sign was yet another one of these defunct floating seafood restaurants. Unlike the Jumbo, the Thai Pack still stands, and according to our tour guide, is supposedly under contract to be renovated, but it's sat closed since the COVID days, and no visible work has been done there for quite some time. So even our guide voices a fair amount of suspicion as to whether anything is going to come of it. Maybe it's my own nostalgia filter at work. Maybe it's that I'm misinterpreting what I'd written down so many years ago. But when I described it as something of a form of Venice, with sampans driving around like automobiles and lashed together like houseboats, I was expecting something a little different than what I was seeing here. Now, things look very much like any other marina, with your typical recreational boats and the like moored together. They just didn't seem all that different from so many other places that I've seen in the past now. Of course, at the time that I wrote this, I hadn't been to Venice, I hadn't been cruising, I hadn't gotten used to seeing the sights that I had, so it's entirely possible that what I was writing at the time was from a very different perspective. So I really don't know what to say. Maybe I've just seen enough of this that the look of Aberdeen isn't quite as exotic as it used to be to me when I was still in college.
Our guide talks about how fishing boats would go out late at night and basically fish by shining lights in the harbor. The fish get hypnotized into going into the nets. The best time to come around here for actual seafood is like 3 or 4 in the morning, which I suppose we could do knowing that it's like 2 or 3 in the afternoon Central Time. Trying to get a ride out here would be impossible.
To be fair, there are still a number of those old Chinese-style houses, or should I say houseboats, in the harbor, so perhaps I'm being a little too harsh on them. It's just that those green Chinese-style roofs are outnumbered by the gleaming white of the recreational and commercial boats that you come to expect everywhere you go, and the place loses a fair amount of its own local color thereby. I'm sure it can't be helped. I'm sure the folks living in Aberdeen would much prefer the fancy commercial boats if they can afford it, so the fact that they can is perhaps a good sign for them. But it does lose a certain amount of character that it once had.
bit of an experience, although different from the way I'd written it down 35 years ago. It felt more like going through a marina, honestly. A little bit more homey, I suppose, in a Chinese sort of way, but didn't see the vendors going through or anything like that that I described back in the day. I'm not sure if it's just the march of time and progress or disease that has changed the place, but it's not the way I wrote it down. I can't say it's the way I remember it because I don't remember it at all. There's still the smell of fish, but not enough to gross anybody out. Maybe college-age girls just get more squeamish than your typical tourist. And to be honest, some things were more exotic back then than they are now. We're a much more global society after all.